Hello, Moley. How are you doing?
Hi, Paul. I am a little nervous.
Don't be nervous, Moley. Everything's going to be absolutely great. Well, welcome, folks. Welcome to this evening. So I guess the first question to ask is, who is Moley?
The funny thing about these books that I always say everything that happens in these books happened in real life. So Moley is a real character. He is a real toy if you read the first book, we purchased this character, this toy at the Easter Fair, exactly as it's written in the book. And he sort of had very much the life that as it is described in the book. So, but because he is such an expressive character,
Hello everyone.
we took him everywhere with us on holidays and so on, and it just was landing itself perfectly for writing a book about him. So there you go, that's Moley. And the books are about his adventures, and they're all real life adventures.
The age range for this book, by the way, Julia, is broadly speaking
5 to 10, I would say. For
5 to
younger readers, it's parents or grandparents really should read aloud, because the book is a chapter book. It's not your typical, it's sort of done in the old-fashioned English children's book style. So the illustrations are black and white pencil illustrations. And there's quite a lot of text. So it's not that sort of type of book where you have a picture and one sentence underneath. So this is a proper chapter book. And so for younger readers, it's better if parents read them, and it lands itself very well for bedtime story, one chapter a night. And older children read it perfectly well themselves.
Yeah, well, that's certainly the feedback that you've got, isn't it, from the first book, in fact, in terms of the way in which it's been used. Another issue that commonly crops up, I think, in the latter part of the book is that Moley is in a position where he is meeting a range of basically beach creatures in Florida, and they are not, I mean, partly, by the way, there's a cultural clash, which we've not mentioned, I think, between some of the Floridian creatures, American creatures, and Moley, who is, well, that certainly strikes me as being a very English toy meeting some very American animals.
Well, he noticed it himself, Moley, that for some strange reason, and probably we all can relate to it, when you are meeting somebody from different culture, like in this situation in America, you become even more English than you are at home. So suddenly he starts talking very formally in a very posh accent, and he asks himself, why am I talking like Owly suddenly? But that happens quite often. Yeah.
I'd like to sort of, in a sense, move away a little bit from the book at this point and just ask Julia some questions, probably much more about the writing of this as a book and the way in which it's written, more than some of the psychological messages that are actually in it. So I guess one of the first things, which it may be that some people have already recognized from the examples that I've actually given this evening, is that the language in the book, to be blunt with you, is not particularly childish. And you know, there are some occasional big words in this, and I just wondered if you could say a little bit about whether that was a conscious decision, if it was, what led you to make that decision, and so on and so forth.
In terms of the language, I deliberately didn't want to dumb down the language, and I used big words. Moley likes big words. In the first book, he says that he wouldn't use a short word if the long one will do. So he prefers to use long words. And I personally think it is very good for children to be exposed to rich language, to interesting words, unusual words. And what's particularly interesting for me is that the first book was read by several classes in Australia, in Abu Dhabi, and in America. And lots of words were used which are not common. Even Paul had to look them up. Some of them he had to look up in the dictionary. But I asked the teachers, were children, did they stumble? Were not they put off by these long words? And the American teacher said, well, the only word they couldn't understand was secatus, because they don't use secatus in America. All the other words, when they are descriptive, when they are within sentences, I think children manage perfectly well to make sense of them. Even if they don't quite understand the meaning of the word, I think they just grasp it intuitively. And I think just using a rich language is always good. So no, I'm not dumbing it down for kids. Obviously, there are some short sentences and short interactions, especially when Moley talks to different characters in America, some small words. They are very, very short in what they're saying. But it's not because I'm doing it for children, it's just because it fits the particular character.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's interesting. It leads in really to my next question, which is, I guess, how you managed to write the book. Now, I know that sounds a slightly strange question, but let me just explain why I'm asking it. Lots of people have books in their heads. I'm near enough as guilty as this as anybody, and I have terrible problems putting pen to paper or the equivalent. In addition to that, you've written a children's book here in English, which I'm sure you don't mind me saying to people is not your first language.
People
So,
spotted it.
yeah. So, I guess the first question is, why did you do it? But I'm also particularly interested in your insights into what it was that helped you to do it. Because I think if there was anybody here who's ever thought about writing themselves and they either don't get round to it or it's an issue for them, I'm just sort of interested to know, really, I suppose, if I'm honest with you, what techniques or attitudes or ways of thinking or things that you organize for yourself to help you to actually achieve the completion of the book. But maybe we'll start off with the slightly easier question about what led you to write a book in the first place.
Well, I always wanted to.
Right.
I always, when I was young, I was writing sort of historical romances and things like that. Never published, but I always wanted to write. And when I came to this country, I can say absolutely, definitely, England produced, or Britain produced, the best children's literature in the world. Because it's just, well, other countries have some good authors, but Britain is just author after author after author and classic after classic after classic for children. So I think the country itself inspires you. And secondly, I just love children. I love children. I love communicating with them. And when I was studying to be a doctor, at some point in my life, I actually wanted to retrain and to become a children's doctor. And I was advised against it, but I just love working with children and loved writing for them. But because English is not my first language, it took me 7 years of basically fighting the imposter syndrome with the first book, because the book was ready. I've written it by pen with, longhand. I write longhand. It was ready, but I just felt I didn't deserve I couldn't dare to present it to English public to read, because they would all turn around and say, it's not your language, you can't speak English, how dare you to write a book in English? But you know what helped? Before publishing Moley, in between, sort of within those 7 years, I wrote a book which is called Mr. Darcy's Guide to Pemberley, which was sort of a variation of Pride and Prejudice. And that actually helped, because if I am going to be daring, I'll be daring writing a variation of Pride and Prejudice, and that was sort of even bigger, bigger cheek. So, yeah, but imposter syndrome was terrible. And then we did, if you remember, we did a video on Socratic questioning, which is actually available to buy. And I was a client in that video, and I was talking about my difficulties with writing. And just unpacking it within that video really helped. And then I thought, okay, I'll sign up for the writing class. And I met an amazing woman who's become my editor since. It's Susanna Waters. And she's actually a sister of Mark Rylance. You know Mark Rylance, the actor? So Susanna is his sister. And just meeting Susanna made me feel it's possible. I can do it, because I sort of have your help and Susanna's help, and just encouragement, and that it's normal, it's okay, you can do it. But perfectionism and imposter syndrome, I think they're two biggest culprits for everyone who is trying to write. These are the things which you have to fight with. Because my first book was proofread probably 7 times by different people. And at the end, they started coming back to me with suggestions which counter, what's the word?
Contradicted each other.
Contradicted, yes, exactly. Contradicted each other. So at that point, I thought, okay, enough. Because this is now a matter of opinion. It's not a matter of grammar. It's not a matter of correct or not correct. One thinks this way, another one thinks this way, and you have to stop at some point.
So can I just push this a little bit further, because I do find that I find this quite interesting. So obviously having or finding an advocate, mentor, and cheerleader was important for you in terms of finding that editor. What about, I mean, but you know, we know with imposter syndrome that voice on our shoulder can return very, very easily and very, very frequently. What did you do, or what did you say to yourself that helped to ensure that it didn't dictate your behavior, so you weren't in a position where basically this remains on your computer or in a drawer, but it never goes further? What else helped you? What did you do? What did you say to yourself that was helpful in that context?
Well, I think at some point I started asking myself a question. What would I regret more? Never publishing it at all, or publishing it and having a few not very good reviews? So, because at some point you just think, okay, you either go ahead or you just leave it. And I just knew that I wanted that character out there, you know, even if 3 children, you know, like him, that's worth it, isn't it? So for me, it's important to get him into the world and see what happens.
Well, that's I think, generally speaking, a very, very useful and important lesson to bear in mind. So many of our clients ruminate about what if I do such and such, but actually, what's sometimes helpful is to actually spend some time ruminating about what happens if I don't.
If I don't, yes.
And you know, that so many of our clients are sort of pushed into a position of passivity and inaction because they're worried about the what if on the basis of the action, but they don't actually spend time considering the what if I don't. I think that sometimes we need that. We need to, so basically, I would argue, to selectively attend to the thing that we normally selectively ignore, which is taking no action at all. Because there's a myth there, isn't there? There's a myth that if I don't take action, then I'm safer. But actually, as you quite rightly say, if you reflect on that and explore it, actually the outcome can feel and can be much worse. And also, I mean, we haven't got time to go into this in further detail at the moment, but I also suspect that when you reflected on the potential downside of publishing, the downside didn't feel as intolerable or unbearable as it first seemed to be. It's obviously not desirable, but it didn't feel such. It's a bit like, to be honest with you, coming back to the metaphor I used earlier, it is a bit like, you know, the child trying to weigh up, you know, what's better for me, standing here on the edge of the pool, or alternatively, jumping in, but with dad just in front of me, ready to keep me safe. Yeah.
Well, that is another thing, because I've decided to go down the route of self-publishing, because I joined quite a lot of author communities and things where people discuss their books and their struggles. And I read stories about people struggling with finding agents and finding publishers. And I just thought, and it's like a repeated story of rejection, 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 rejection. And that I wasn't prepared to face. So I thought, okay, I will pay for it myself. I will find the illustrator myself. But I don't want to go through this repeated experience of rejection. That I wasn't prepared for. Maybe when you're younger, when you have lots of time ahead of you, you can sort of invest a bit more time. So for me, it was important to let the character out. And then if somebody one day finds him and wants to represent him, fine. But to go that way and go through repeated rejection, I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah, and I think that was a good decision. And we've sort of seen the results, haven't we, in terms of sales as well. I need to bring things to an end now, folks, because
I just wanted to say, because everybody just writes to me directly, we don't have a chat as such. Jenny is asking about the process of self-publishing and finding the illustrator and promotion and all of that. We probably can have session for those who are thinking of self-publishing a book. We could have a separate session on that and just discuss those things. I just wanted to open it up to people, because we've been talking just two of us, Paul.
Sorry.
Let's just, if you have anything to say, guys, please, and just unmute yourself, because chat doesn't work clearly.
I'd just like to say, Julia, how much I enjoyed your first book, and I did put a little something on Amazon, I think, at the time. I have actually got your second book, but I haven't quite got round to reading it yet. But I think my feeling with the first book was very much how, as a speech and language therapist, I really, really kind of valued the language side of it. And you know, it was so rich. The language was so rich, and the descriptions, all of that. I thought it was a joy to read. And I'm interested in the next one, because of all the things that you've pointed out today about you know, some of the anxieties that children have, and so I'm looking forward to reading it, and congratulations to you as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming tonight. I really appreciate it, because we knew the session is not really our normal SDS Thursday, but I am very grateful for you sparing an hour of your time talking to us about my new book. And like, new book is like a baby, you love it and you want it to do well. So thank you so much.